In this video, we're going to look at the concept of probability. Specifically, we're going to focus on determining the probability of an event, as well as expressing a probability as a fraction, decimal, percent, and in words. So the outcomes we're going to cover are basically the same thing. We're going to calculate the probability of an event based on a data set, and we're going to express a given probability as a fraction, decimal, and percent, and in a statement. So what is probability? Probability is the mathematical likelihood of something happening. It's a ratio that compares the number of possible successful outcomes to the total number of possible outcomes. In other words, if we want a certain event to happen, we look at how many chances we have of that event happening versus how many possible events there are in total. So we'll look at a couple of examples. And it can be represented as a fraction, a decimal, or a percent, or of course in words. So here are some common examples where we could see probabilities come into play. If I wanted to roll a die, and I wanted to determine the probability of rolling, say, a 3, I would say that there are one face on a die with a 3, and on the die there are 6 sides in total. So the probability of rolling a 3 on a single die is 1 in 6. We'll often see probabilities come into play when we're dealing with cards as well. If you're playing card games, it's often useful to have a bit of an idea of what the probability of a certain card coming up in the next lay is when you're looking to win a hand. And also, if you're flipping coins, you can often try to determine the probability of flipping a certain face on your coin. So a coin, of course, has two faces, a heads and a tails. So if I wanted to determine the probability of flipping a heads, there is one head on a coin, and there are 2 faces in total. So the probability of flipping a head on a coin is 1 in 2. Here's an example. You're fishing in a lake that has a stocked fish population of 360 fish. We know that 162 of the fish are whitefish, and 108 of the fish are trout. We want to determine what is the probability that one of the fish you catch is A, either of these 2 kinds of fish, or B, a trout. So we're going to tackle each of these individually. In question A, we want to determine the probability of catching either a whitefish or a trout. We know that in the lake there are 162 whitefish and there are 108 trout. That gives us a total of 270 fish that are either whitefish or trout in the lake. So the probability of catching either type of fish, written as a fraction, is 270 of those fish out of the total amount of fish that are in the lake, which is 360. Now 270 over 360 is the fraction. However, we can reduce this fraction by dividing both the numerator and the denominator of the fraction by 90, since both have a common factor of 90 in them. So if we divide 270 by 90 and 360 by 90, we're going to get a fraction of 3 over 4. So this is the same fraction, just in lowest terms. As a decimal, we simply take the number of successful outcomes, which is 270, and divide that by the total possible outcomes, and that would be 360. And if you do that on your calculator, you're going to find that it equals 0.75. To turn it into a percentage, we start off with the same exact calculation as determining a decimal version of the probability, but we add another step. So we have 0.75 as a decimal probability, but we're going to multiply that by 100, and of course is in units percent. So 0.75 means we have a 75% chance of catching either a whitefish or a trout. And finally, to put that in words, the probability of catching either a whitefish or a trout in this lake is 3 in 4. So out of every 4 fish we catch, we could expect that 3 of them should be a whitefish or a trout. In question B, it asks specifically how many, or what's the probability of catching a trout out of this lake? Well, in this lake there are 108 trout. So as a fraction, the probability of catching a trout is 108 over 360. But once again, this can be reduced. We can divide both our numerator and our denominator by 36. If we divide 108 by 36, we get 3. If we divide 360 by 36, we get 10. So the fraction in lowest terms for the probability of catching a trout is 3 over 10. If we want to turn that into a decimal, we take 108, the number of trout, divided by 360, the total number of fish, and that'll give us a value of 0.3. Okay, if we want to turn this into a percent, we start with the same exact calculation. 108 divided by 360 equals 0.3. But then we have to multiply it by 100, and it's in units percent. So 0.3 is the same thing as 30%. Finally, in words, the probability of catching a trout is 3 in 10. So once again, if we catch 10 fish in this lake, there's a good chance that 3 of them are going to be trout. So to summarize, the probability is the number of successful outcomes, the outcomes we want or expect to see, over the total possible outcomes that are available. And again, we can write it in words, as a fraction, as a decimal, or as a percent.